How would you like to start the day with the Linux and open source news? Or maybe end the day? I guess it depends on where you live. Where do you live exactly? YouTube might know, but I don't. Anyway, this week Red Hat is now planning to officially drop X11 from the next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We also have the first beta of Plasma 6, the KDE Gear compilation, and the KDE frameworks, and they still managed to slot in a few new features as well. And we also have some big moves for the Linux desktop in general, including better Wayland integration, Pipewire, secure boot on NVIDIA, and HDR support. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare. They offer solutions like kernel life patching and extended support for end-of-life distributions, so you can make sure your Linux server or workstation fleet is always up to date and secure, all while minimizing downtime. And this week they're inviting you to a webinar, which should be especially interesting if you have machines running CentOS 7. The webinar will only take 30 minutes of your time, and it will tell you about all the risks of running an end-of-life distro, as CentOS 7 will reach that status next year, and also currently has many unpatched vulnerabilities that you might not be aware of. And since just telling you about the risks isn't enough, they will also talk about solutions to resolve these unpatched vulnerabilities, and also solutions to securely use CentOS 7 past its end of life in June 2024 until you're ready to upgrade. This will happen this Wednesday on the 6th of December, and it's entirely free, so if you want to join and learn more about this, I left a link in the description of the video. So, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is officially dropping X11 with their next version, version 10. It's planned for 2025, so there's still a lot of time. But X11 will be unsupported, and the only traces of it that will be left is through Wayland. Red Hat engineers basically said that yes, there are still a few gaps and some apps that need updates, but also that Wayland is mature enough, and that by the time RHEL 10 is out, they will have fixed all the blockers. So RHEL 10 will not provide packages for X11 or the ability to run an X11 session. This will also give them more time to work on HDR, on better security, on mixed DPI settings, on GPU hot plugging, on gestures, and more, as the burden of maintaining the old spaghetti code of X11 and packaging it will be removed. This is yet another nail in X11's coffin, and it's done relatively nicely as it leaves a full year to fix issues and to give a strong signal to app developers to start supporting the various portals needed to operate properly on Wayland, and to support Wayland natively as well, without X-Wayland or X11. So Fedora already has plans to ditch X11 before RHEL 10 happens, but this will probably also have a ripple effect on other distributions. RHEL is the biggest enterprise distro out there, and I'm pretty sure others will follow suit because they won't want to keep the burden of maintaining X11. Still, I think it's done in a nice way, it leaves plenty of time, and it gives a strong deadline, relatively long enough in the future, for app developers to actually work on supporting Wayland. Now, Plasma 6 saw its first beta release this week, and this isn't just the desktop itself, it's what they call a mega release, and mega it is indeed, since it contains not only Plasma 6, but also the KDE Gear app compilation and the KDE framework, so basically the entire stack, apps and desktop. Of course, it is only meant for testing purposes, and they emphasize the fact that it is not ready for day-to-day use. But if you want to give it a shot, if you want to see what's new, and if you want to help report some bugs, then this is going to be a good time. Still, the team managed to fit a few more features in between bug fixes, notably setting the wallpaper for any of your screens from a revamped settings page. Discover gained a new section in the home page to showcase new and updated apps for Flatpak or Snaps. The nightlight feature now shows you a timeline for when this blue light reduction mode will be active, and there's a new optional effect to shake your cursor to make it bigger, like in macOS, for people who have difficulties finding it. The Archive Manager now has an option to extract and delete the archive afterwards as well, available straight from the right-click menu. There were also plenty of smaller UX improvements and 180 bug fixes. The final release is getting closer and closer, and while there aren't many big, impactful visual changes, it looks like it's packing so many smaller details and improvements that the video I'm gonna have to make about it when it releases will be a very long one. Now, as per GNOME, there is more progress on the various things that their recent €1 million grant helped fund. WebP is now supported in the GNOME platform. Systemd Home-D is now better supported, with initial work starting on using TPM chips for encrypting the user directory. Memory leaks are being identified and plugged in Flatpak and portals, and there's some work being done on the new accessibility infrastructure. The open with dialogues are also being improved in GNOME, and a few bugs were also fixed in the GNOME shell. On top of that, we have a bunch of updates to GNOME apps. Gafor, the modeling tool, got a new version with plenty of usability improvements. Carburetor, an app to set up a Tor proxy on your desktop or smartphone, got a new version as well. Pods, the app that helps you manage your Podman containers, gained support for volumes, and the interface has been refreshed with the latest libadwaita widgets. And Kuha, the screen recorder, got a few UX improvements. Small changes this week, but I guess a lot of people are just focused on bringing all the new cool projects that their €1 million grant helped fund, which is really nice because they won't just benefit GNOME, they will benefit the entire Linux desktop ecosystem, and that's always really nice to see. Now this week there was a lengthy blog post from Christian Schaller going over the next areas of focus for Fedora after the release of Fedora 39. First is Pipewire, with the release of Pipewire 1.0. I will freely admit I thought this thing was pretty much complete and done with, but it looks like there's still more work happening in there, notably to support cameras in OBS, from moving away from video for Linux, or supporting WebRTC. HDR is another thing they're focusing on, with the first use case, which is running a full-screen HDR app, being close to done. Having mixed SDR and HDR windows on the same screen is still a bit further away, but Christian is expecting that for summer 2024, which is not that far. For Wayland, they're focusing on enabling remote login with a headless system, and this should be ready for GNOME 46. On the Wayland front, there's also work being done on Input Leap, which lets you share the same input devices, so mouse and keyboard, between different computers, like what Barrier does for X11. There's also some work being done on NVIDIA drivers, with plans to, at some point, use the open source stack for NVIDIA with NVK and the big updates that came to Nouveau recently. They apparently have team members picking up the work on Nouveau since the main maintainer left the project recently, but they still expect people to have to rely on the proprietary drivers for a while. They're also looking at how they could enable Secure Boot with the proprietary NVIDIA drivers, but they're not making any promises. For accessibility, they will of course be relying on the new framework being worked on in GNOME and funded by the recent grant, but they also want to port GNOME software to DNF5 for a faster experience. Plenty of good stuff happening, and you'll notice that most of these changes are on Linux desktop projects, not just on a specific distro or desktop, which is a theme I'm starting to notice more and more. A lot of the work is going into what furthers the Linux desktop as a whole. We're starting to converge on a vision, a stack, and a path, which feels really nice, finally. Now, still on desktops, it looks like Budgie will not, after all, move to the Enlightenment libraries to be the base of Budgie 11. They had expressed their plans to move away from a GNOME-based desktop as they had too much stuff to patch in to turn the GNOME base and libraries into something that worked for them. And they had set their sights on EFL, which are a set of libraries used to build the Enlightenment desktop. Since Budgie wants to turn to Wayland for the future though, it looks like these might not be the best choice, as EFL only has experimental support for Wayland that is not deemed ready for end users. As a result, Budgie is looking at how they can move forward with their plans to ditch GNOME libraries and components, especially looking at what XFCE is doing, since they've also announced their plans to move to Wayland in the future, including a compatibility layer that bridges the gap between X11 and Wayland to avoid breaking things and spending years to fix them to get back to the previous usability state without any benefit. It's all interesting stuff, but I also feel like we're starting to create a two-speed ecosystem for the Linux desktop. On the one hand, we have GNOME and KDE, which are moving forward at full speed and just improving their own bases to support a modern Linux stack. But on the other hand, we have desktops that do rely on these base platforms that don't really have the manpower to port all the stuff they built on these platforms to actually support Wayland. And so we might end up with two big desktops that are super modern and efficient for everyone, and a bunch of other desktops that are either stuck in limbo trying to port their stuff with 2, 3, 4 years being late, or just abandoning Wayland and altogether and just sticking to an old stack that will be unmaintained. I'm pretty afraid that this will mean some projects will die and we have less choice on Linux. Now, Peertube users rejoice. Peertube 6 is now out with a lot of improvements for users, for people who host instances, and for content creators as well. First, you can now upload password-protected videos to make sure you share these only with the people you want. You can set a password manually, or you can manage them with the Peertube API. In terms of the watching experience though, you get little thumbnails when hovering over the timeline of a video, so you know what's coming and where to click. Although this will only come to videos uploaded after the instance was updated to Peertube 6, unless the instance's admin runs a command to generate these thumbnails for older videos, something that will probably be very resource intensive. You'll also get chapters for videos, finally, and they can also be imported from videos synced from YouTube. Creators can also now replace a video with another one, something YouTube doesn't let you do, unless you're a giant channel like Linus Tech Tips. Finally, Peertube offers a stress test suite for admins to see which configuration will work best for your server. And there are performance improvements as well, plus some accessibility fixes, and they removed support of WebTorrent in favor of WebRTC peer-to-peer. A good bunch of changes here that should definitely improve the watching experience on Peertube. I have no idea when my instance, stillvids.com, will update to Peertube 6. I'll check in with them to know if they have any plans and when that's coming. And let's finish this with the gaming news. Nvidia users can also rejoice as Mesa 23.3 dropped, with the NVK driver to have fully open source Vulkan 1.0 compliant drivers for Nvidia GPUs. Now, obviously it is not going to work for every GPU and it will not deliver performance on par with the proprietary drivers yet, but it is still a giant step forward to have that available for everyone to use and test easily. There are also some new extensions added for the Asahi graphics drivers notably, which should make using graphical acceleration on recent Macs much better. Now the final part for Vulkan support on Wine and Wayland has been added to Wine. This work from Collabora means that you can actually now run some games on Wine and Wayland natively, if you use the latest source code from Git. Obviously, there are some issues, notably with mouse input in first-person titles, but this will be fixed in the future. That's really cool to see. This Wayland transition has been really fast for Wine and it's almost ready for day-to-day use, which means it will also be ready in Proton for the general Linux desktop and Steam users relatively soon, and that's always really nice. But not everyone is super keen on Wayland yet, as the PS2 emulator PCSX2 just disabled their Wayland backend. Their support was apparently very broken and very buggy in every game, and it was even more broken for GNOME users. The developers posted a pretty scathing comment accompanying the merge request disabling that Wayland backend, pointing out all the issues they encountered, which means that for now X11 or X-Wayland will be the only way to use this emulator, unless you want to enable Wayland support back using Flatseal if you install the emulator as a Flatpak. And I do agree that there are some issues left with Wayland, especially for gaming. But the comment the developer posted was pretty weird, because he clearly stated that there has been little progress on Wayland for a decade, which is either completely untrue or very misinformed. Now, what is for certain though is that I can't end this video without this segue to our sponsor. If you're looking for a new computer and you plan to run Linux on it, and you want to support Linux's development, click the link in the description below. Stop buying devices that only ship with Windows pre-installed. Buy something that supports Linux out of the box from Tuxedo, our sponsor. They have a big range of devices that will fit every price point and every need, from laptops, desktops, NUCs, all power levels, anything you want. They're all very customizable in terms of components, the keyboard layout, you can have your own logo laser etched, and all the laptops can be opened, repaired, and upgraded. All the devices I use nowadays, my editing station and my gaming console running Holo ISO, they're both from Tuxedo. I only use their devices these days, and they're really, really good. So if you need a new computer and you want to support a company that actually contributes to Linux development with patches and drivers, click the link in the description below and get yourself something from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment, and if you didn't, there's always that dislike button and the comment section to tell me why. And if you really enjoy the channel and you want to support what I do, I left plenty of links to do just that in the description of the video, from LiberaPay, Patreon, PayPal, YouTube memberships, you know the drill. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!